for it. Sorry. Um, I would like to apologize. Obviously, I did not get to my homework assignment. This past week coincided with the first 2-hour extension to being open in Washington, D.C. So they tacked on however many 2 times 6, 12 hours. And we were very understaffed. So I ended up working a full 60 hours. And I got my second shot last week too. So I had a fever and worked 60 hours. I was down for the count. I apologize, but I'm here and I will be listening and participating however I can.
Totally good. Sounds great. Glad you're feeling better, and congratulations on opening back up. I don't think there's anything to apologize for. So there's a lot of shit going on, and that will be forever true. So
thank you.
Good. You showed up. High five. Alina, I know you and I were just talking about some of the work that you did in the potential partnership tab. Do you want to just talk about that?
I was just dropping in like organizations, some of which I have kind of existing relationships with, and some of which I just know by reputation, that I feel like are kind of sharing the ethos of what I believe this committee is trying to aim for. So
cool.
I know I'm thinking about things from like a general like workers' rights and social justice perspective.
Well, and I know in some other conversations I've had, Kim specifically, I don't think you were on when Alina and I were first talking about this list, but the idea of partnerships at different levels, even having just a space where those ideas could go live and then people could find the equivalents in their local environment, could be a good resource for some of the other conversations that are happening in different committees or task force. So of interest. Anyway, and Kim, I don't know what we are talking about in I'm doing another one of those Instagram video things, and I barely know how to do Instagram, the things I do for the USBG, but it's coming up. So if we could even potentially talk about some of this stuff there too. What have you been up to since our last meeting, Madam President?
I'm just here to kind of observe. We're going to be doing task force soon on our next XCOM call for a bridge task force. So I'm just here to kind of hear what you guys are doing and what you're up to. So
totally cool. Cole, what about you? How have you been since the last meeting? What kind of thoughts or ideas or conversations have you been up to?
I've been mostly good. As sort of similar to Carlos, things are opening up a little bit more down here. So I've been sort of actively doing bar management stuff a little bit more, which is good and bad, I guess. Just in terms of bandwidth, it's good for the world. Because Jess, you and I had our sort of intro meeting before our first meeting officially with the bigger group, I had already done what you had asked in the homework, so the focus areas, identifying different sort of social identities and some of the ways that you might decide where to go when you get to a new town. So those were already, like, I'd already done those, but the potential partner stuff, Alina, there's a lot of really good stuff in here, and a lot of sort of opportunities that there may not be a one-to-one analogous organization in different markets, but just the ideas of who to reach out to reach different types of people in the service industry, different types of bartenders and other sort of professionals, and the social justice element of some of these organizations too, is I think a really great jumping off point. So thank you for that.
Just started working on a big project with NIVA, the National Independent Venue Association, and I'm super impressed with the work they've been able to do over the last year, especially. I think it would be really cool to see like what that means on a national level with us potentially, because they're in our communities in a really big way. And they're really effective with like lobbying on a national level.
That's rad. That's really cool. Well, I know that there are some people who have expressed an interest in being involved in this group and this conversations who aren't on this call, or they might not have even been on the first call, but I've attempted to connect and talk with them in between. Y'all are also encouraged to do that. I'm recording the call again on the off chance that they watch the recording. I feel like recordings of webinars that you wanted to be on is now the new spam, and we all just have like a backlog of videos we're never going to watch. But just in case, I'll add to the pile. What I thought we could potentially do today, at least, is like kind of guiding the process. I think it was in a conversation with Kim that because the USBG is not being, I think the formal professional term is not being a douche canoe when it comes to DEI efforts, and that it is actually embedded and deeply connected and involved in all of the committees and all of the task forces. It is also super confusing, as each one is like, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing. And there's a lot of crossover of people, not because of tokenizing of identities. That's an exciting twist, but because we want to have someone who has their foot in this committee and their foot on this committee to be able to bridge, no pun intended, the gap of those conversations. So I'm getting confused as to like which group is doing which. And so I have referred to this group, and y'all are welcome to say, no, I don't like that. But the membership bridge task force for recruitment and retention, I'm just calling this group R&R because it's recruitment and retention of members and keeping members, right? Both on the, ideally on the chapter level, developing a tool on the chapter level, but these practices and these skills will also impact recruitment and retention on a regional level, on a national level, similar to how partnershiping with organizations that are in similar situations or more advanced, I think can kind of help with those recruitment and retention efforts. So I have referred to this genre of people as the R&R group. I'm hoping that that is not inappropriate or something. I just can't keep all of the things straight, and we can come up with a new name if we want to. But the idea that this group is focusing on, as far as like outcomes, or at least the first product, because we might do it faster than I think we will, and then we might have another homework assignment after that. But the first idea is a tool that can be incorporated into the updated CHOPS manual for chapter leadership to simultaneously teach people the skills and utilize the skills they may already have and or are currently learning to diversify, include, and create more equitable opportunities for people of different social identities, different professional identities in their local communities, and to broaden that out, which could include suppliers and vendors, educational components, social components, partnerships, things like this. So then that's the kind of the ripple effect. So in the first meeting that we had, the idea, and like on the Google Sheet, just to kind of review the tabs in case it's been a hot second, the idea is and Cole mentioned this when we started talking about the focus areas, what I have seen as a best practice in for chapter leadership is chapter leadership changes at least every year, and sometimes even within a year. And not all of those chapter leaders have recruitment and retention leadership based skills, let alone DEI lenses to be looking at suppliers and vendors and those kind of things. And even if they have those lenses, shit can still happen, and things like slip through the cracks, and someone's an email behind, and then bad things that got vetoed get included, and then you have to like catch up. Like, welcome to humans. So the kind of typical best practice that would be that CHOPS manual, which is kind of the first thing to really focus on, is an idea of templates for chapter leadership, or possibly the person or the committee delegated by chapter leadership, to be able to focus on different areas of their community and members within those communities that have different occupational jobs that are available to be members. Or never forget the enthusiasts, right? They're available to be members too, and are an important component to the education of the chapter, as well as a number of different social identities. So the idea is to kind of teach those skills, and also I was in a different group and they referred to this as monetizing it, which seems like we're trying to make a profit, but what they meant by monetizing it is that like it's a simple process that makes you feel like you're making progress, but you're actually learning skills. So instead of it being like making a profit, it's like the gain is the skills that you don't notice that you're gaining each month. So if that tool was to move forward, even starting with the list that's in the first tab of the focus areas, and I'll encourage people to look at this again before the next meeting, but currently there's more than 12. So if we wanted to do, you focus on something a month, we can have more than 12, and people can pick and choose, or maybe maybe one of these things doesn't exist in their community. That seems unlikely, but maybe that's true. I didn't know if we wanted to spend a little bit of time first on this tab, just looking at the different things that people would focus on intentionally in kind of deciding who are these folks, where who of these identities, where do they, are there venues that are owned by people with these experiences or these identities? Who are people in our local community that have different occupations or different social identities? And what are we doing to welcome them, include them as guests, use their venues, use their suppliers, things like that, but just focusing one kind of facet at a time. So then usually what happens is about 4 to 6 months into this process, people stop using the little worksheets and actually start doing this on their own. That's kind of the plan. Some people will start off with these skills and will be like, why are we tokenizing this group of people? But somebody else on their board doesn't even know what tokenizing means. So like it's a starting place to think about. How is that landing on you? And are there other things that you would add to the focus areas just off the top of your head currently? If we're over 12 now, we might as well just keep going over 12.
I think it sounds like a great idea, but I mean, I'm not part of the task force, but I think it sounds like a great starting place and easy to do.
Yeah, it can be accessible, and if it's, I feel like, Alina, I'm remembering another conversation that you and I had, but the first step is only awful if there isn't a second step, right? Like it doesn't end at step 1, it is literally step 1. Then step 1 feels less, ooh, right? And there's more people that this is brand new to than not brand new to. So then if we can get step 1 done, then we can actually start looking at step 2, which might get not just to the potential partnerships that are already listed, but really diving into supplier, holding suppliers accountable to their own workplace culture. How do suppliers treat their employees? What is their life like? You know, Bill Gates, actually, I'm getting ready to be super wonky, but Bill Gates just posted as part of Microsoft's like annual report that every vendor and every supplier that is utilized by Microsoft, from like office supplies up, every single one of them has to have a living wage, some kind of sustainability plan for any waste that is coming off of anything that they actually produce, and knowledge of their production chain and what its standard is for a living wage. And if they don't have those things, they cannot be a vendor with Microsoft. Now, will he actually do that? Because that's firing a lot of people. But if Bill Gates is putting that out there, then it's possible that some of the vendors may step up into some of those areas. And And it's also possible that he'll be a hypocrite and keep somebody anyway who doesn't, but maybe they're on probation or something. But the guild is kind of doing something similar, I think, but that's like step 3, maybe.
Yeah, I love that. That's kind of a lofty goal, but I would love to eventually be able to do something like that
Mhm.
of our suppliers and partners.
Okay. Being able to hold them accountable or
Mhm.
I mean, it's voting with our money, effectively. I believe in doing it on a personal level. And then, yeah, if we could aspire to, as an organization, get to a place where we can do that, like with our vendors, that would be fantastic. Yeah, I think the last year, if it's taught us anything as a country, is that, like we do have more say in how things happen around us than they want us to realize.
Mhm. Yeah. Another industry that I work with, they're really taking a stance around gender pay equity. Specifically, that's kind of what they've chosen to do. And there's a number of reasons why that makes sense, that that's what they're focusing on doing. And they've made a commitment by 2023, I think, that they will not work with a company that does not, 1, pay everyone a living wage, and 2, there can be no gap at all financially between anyone who works there at any level. And that in order to have the honor, like look at that posturing, right? Like in order to have the honor of be the supplier that they work with, they have to prove what it is, and they will do interviews with employees from different places. Like, wow, that sounds like a level of accountability that we normally hide. So interesting.
We've certainly been talking about that at a local level, where like I think we're all just really strapped for like time to take on new projects, but with things opening up and places hiring again, like how we can maybe hold our industry more accountable for having a certain baseline of industry standards when they're doing hiring, and how USBG could maybe mediate that for folks in our community who are obviously skilled professionals and being offered some very bad situations right now without really a good way of filtering it.
Yeah, and this kind of toolkit that I have seen, that I don't know if y'all have seen, so there's part of me is kind of like walking you baby step to something that I know where we're going. But you may feel like, she said we're going to Disney World, I'm just along for the ride. But this kind of toolkit also is, chapter leaders have the possibility of becoming hirers. And this may be a skill set or a process that they utilize when they think about where to post the job description, or how to diversify where they're even searching, or heaven forbid, when they're actually applying for a job, what to actually be looking for. So then they get a better intel of kind of the questions you don't ask because they're not HR approved, but are about the subjectivity of fit and representation and things like that. So the toolkit has a lot of secret uses. And you sneak it in under like chapter membership. Oh wait, look, you've developed a skill,
Yeah. No, self-advocacy is certainly something that I've been trying to get some more programming around, because we don't really have like, we don't have like larger groups that are necessarily advocating for workers in this industry successfully. We don't have labor union options like there were in the past that make sense for most people. So how do you take that on yourself?
Mm-hmm.
How do you make sure that like your workplace is going to be a safe and supportive environment for you?
Mm-hmm. It sounds like there could also be, this is a little off topic, but there could be kind of a Venn diagram of such with the symposium that's coming out of the foundation around those kind of issues and initiatives. I know that you've been in conversation with some folks, but that could be a really great place to not just launch, but like keep that conversation going and keeping it central. So if I draw attention back to the focus areas, so there's I'm not looking at them super closely, but there's like roughly 18, maybe a couple that are kind of clarifiers of original ones. So let's say that there's more than 12 social identities, if we can kind of hold that in one piece of the conversation, right? Then there is the occupational variations of members. I feel like an avatar has come up a lot in conversations that I've been a part of, where like maybe it was easy or low hanging fruit or economical, but I've been calling him Jeff, who's like a white guy with a scraggly beard who wears a vest and makes high-end cocktails and competes into things. Perhaps y'all have met Jeff, right? And there are other types of jobs that aren't represented hardly at all on the chapter level, let alone certainly not as we start like getting into leadership opportunities. And so that person keeps coming up as like the single mom who is the bartender at Olive Garden, who is not Jeff. And those two people are not the only people either, right? But if we keep Jeff and Susan in mind, there's also owners, there's different kinds of bartenders. I had a conversation the other day with a woman of color who was saying that at the Guild, everybody is convinced because she's a Black woman and is a traveling bartender, she started at a strip club. And for fun, I did not make a connection as to why you would start at a strip club. I would assume everybody starts at Olive Garden. So we had this amazing conversation about like what it means, what your entry point actually is, and what it's perceived to be. So I kind of see that in that occupational tab. And then below education, talking about like treasurers or people who are accountants or people who do the books or the ordering or the inventory for venues. That level of detail is a skill, not an identity, but a skill that might be needed for leadership. So some of the things that could get added to this kind of rubric are related to skills that are needed to function in a leadership group. I may or may not have had a couple of therapy sessions with people who served on the advisory group last year, where I had a very steep learning curve that I was working with folks that don't use Doodle every day. They don't check email every day. Tuesdays is the weekend, right? And like the weekend is definitely not the weekend. So I had to learn kind of what the culture of that thing is, but that's also only a certain type of members that would fall into that category. So anyway, so 19 and or 20 and 21 kind of get to those pieces, as well as outside of the hospitality industry entirely. All good ideas may generate more ideas. But the way that the focus areas, we're going to put a pin in that, to the next tab, to the decisions, which Cole showed off and did his homework in advance and had a pre-call. How spoiled are you? But the idea that I want to connect, and this is probably the main homework for the next meeting, is that I'm going to call them templates, right? So the portion of chops that is a blank set for people to develop the skills while they are doing the actions of actually focusing on a particular item or a particular identity or a particular profession or a particular kind of venue, is that you have to get out of where you're at. And so Cole actually shared, I think y'all have all seen it because of other committees you're on too, but Cody from the NCC did a write-up of something that we talked about as the easy yes, and that it's really comfortable to like, oh, I know a guy, but you often only know a guy who is very similar to all the other guys you know. And that when we say an easy yes, that's we get shit done. That's true. And usually we found out about it last minute anyway. So the urgency is to get it accomplished versus being thoughtful about it. So in some ways, this template is also teaching like forethought, planning in advance. What does that mean? What does that look like? But the homework assignment of when you are new to a place, what do you do to look for a place? The idea of that is that you're coming up with like a template of questions that when you have kind of that month's planning or that month's lens, you can go through the same kind of template of questions, right? So some of this language is a little cumbersome because it's very like us, them based. But if you are not the identity or the occupation or the educational level or whatever that is being chosen, and you're in April and you're going to focus on like highly educated women that brunch. I just made all that up. So highly educated women that brunch. Okay, great. Who is that? Where do they brunch in town? What are those venues? Who are those women? Who is working in those types of venues? And are we doing anything to use those suppliers, those vendors, or encouraging those folks to come? I just made all of that up. But those kind of questions need to be relatively routine, so that as you change the lens, you're still asking relatively the same questions, but you're going to come up with different parts of town or different places or different areas that you may not even know about, you may not even think about. But as soon as you're able to kind of give that, then you can be like, wait a minute,
Veuve
stereotypically.
Clicquot. Veuve Clicquot.
Right, great. So like as soon as it happens, you're like, yeah, that thing. Or like, wait. My aunt, she goes to this place. Or like, oh, I used to date this guy. He totally works at this place. Like by being able to do that, the venues will pop up, but those venues also come with areas of town, owners, people who work there, people who frequent there, and suppliers who are there. So that's kind of the point of like, how do you make these decisions? That if we can come up with a template of what those questions would be, then regardless of the lens, or if we, we could even come up with kind of thinking about the cocktail competition, that they got like really specific atmospheres, I guess is what you would say, and they have to make 5 drinks for that particular kind of situation. Could follow that kind of lead of coming up with, this is the scenario that we're going to focus on. Blue collar workers who, I live on the ocean. So blue collar workers who just got off their shift at the fishery or the cannery, where do they go? Right. So there's 4 different shifts at the cannery. So there's a bar really close to the cannery that is open almost 24 hours a day. Because I'm trying to pay attention to blue collar workers who work at the fisheries. That's how I'm going to find out about that particular bar. Who else goes there? Who works there? What vendors do they use? What venues do they use? Do you see what I'm doing? How these two connect?
Yeah, so you mentioned it last time, I think, that like having almost like a common focus per month of the year, and that helps us concentrate our efforts on a common task at hand, which is, okay, this month we are all collectively concentrating on, like you said, women and how to attract more, and so every month having a different theoretical theme or neck of the woods per se, but then at least we almost have a systematic approach that is inherently designed to be inclusive, right?
Right. So the I think, Carlos, you and I talked about this on the way to Florida, but if instead of the pressure, and everything I'm saying is very like first base of this conversation, but instead of having the pressure of every program you do every single week of every month being 100% inclusive, that'd be awesome. So here is an activity of like, you are welcome to do more than this, but here is the bare minimum suggestion, right? So April is Asian Heritage Month. So then to learn how to plan programs, you're not going to start doing this in April. You're actually going to start doing this probably in February, because in February, you're going to have a conversation about what are you going to do in April. So Asian folks as a group, which in itself is already problematic, but we're just starting somewhere, right? So like, do we know any Asian folks who own venues or are ambassadors or brands or suppliers in town or own venues? Okay, that's quite, I'm making up the questions now for tab 2, right? Is there a part of town that tends to be like, we have a little part of town that actually got cleared out because I live in California. Welcome to racism and hate, but it was called Little Chinatown, right? So is there a part of town that is relegated primarily in segregated racial neighborhoods that is primarily an Asian part of town? Are there multiples? Because not everyone who identifies as Asian likes each other. They often also segregate amongst themselves. So where do they live? What venues exist there? What if we're sticking to hospitality-based stuff? What are different holidays that are happening at this particular time? I was on a call with someone the other day, and they were telling me, or yesterday or Saturday, and they were telling me that they can't meet next weekend because it's Easter. To which I said, we are literally meeting as Passover is beginning. Your colleagues are here. If they want to meet next week, you should probably be here for Easter because you made them come during Passover. We don't think about outside of ourselves, right? So by being able to focus on it, you are welcome to do more. And just in case, April's coming and it happens to be this. So work through these kind of decision-making processes, these questions for your local community. So now you have 2 months to figure out new venues, to figure out suppliers, invite new people, have guests, things like this, instead of like February 18th, trying to throw together a Black History Month program, asking the 2 or 3 Black bartenders you know to come and do something in 2 days, right? Which, by the way, is a clutch move for USBG. So like, don't do that anymore. So then can you like plan further out and intentionally? So Carlos, to your point about being inclusive, is that when you plan a year out, you can look back and see how inclusive you were. And that's a starting place. So then maybe the next year you actually can be additionally inclusive because you can actually have those plans, and now you can do something else because maybe you're going to create a tradition of a programming plan where this is what's going to happen. So now you can plan on top of it or plan on top of it. Not that you have to do 1,000 programs, you just have to be intentional about the programs you do. Is that clarifying, Carlos?
Yes, it is.
Super dupes. So the main problem here is that I am not one of you. I know I play one on TV, but I'm not. So the idea of kind of what decisions would come has to be open-ended enough that any chapter leader anywhere would be able to answer these questions. And based on what kind of answers they come up with, which let's start with, I don't know, I've never thought about it. If that's their first answer, then what's the second question that gets them to think about it? Where do they go? Like, what do they look up on the internet? What do they look up in the phone book? Where do they drive around? What do they do? How do you begin to find out what you don't know? And those are questions I could answer in other industries, maybe, but I don't know that I can do that in this industry other than just being someone who occasionally goes out to eat pre-COVID, which was a year ago. So that's why the decision-making questions are so important. So that the original assignment that I gave Cole was pretend you're new in town and you don't know anything about where you live. What do you do to determine where you want to go? Because the next level of question is, what do you do to determine where people who aren't you want to go? How do they discern where to and where not to go in your local community? How do you know this? And because all of us live in different communities, we should be able to come up with a template of questions that really guide someone through the process as they are building the skills of basically looking at what they don't know. Alina, it looks like you wanted to say something, or you just posture.
Adjusting my computer.
Got it. Okay. So in theory, if we have the ability to focus on, and 12 is a year, and that's like the length of service of a term. Some people, like, they don't really get shit rolling for like 2 or 3 months. So then it would be like 9. Maybe it's a month and a half that they haven't gotten stuff rolling, but they need a month and a half of transition time as elections come up at the other end. So narrowing down what those focus areas are going to be and narrowing down the questions that you ask that are secretly developing skills. That's probably the most important next step homework assignment. because then once those things are developed, I can pull them out and turn them into like 12 worksheets. So then we have something to kind of edit that would be potentially something that this group would sign off on or like. That would be the first step of what would end up in CHOPS, where I think the potential partnerships and the things that I don't know because I'm not in industry, I think are going to be like the second and the third pieces of the same part for CHOPS. This is just the starting place to get things rolling and going. Usables. I know for the directory, I haven't been able to connect with Joe P, and I don't have his phone number, so I can't text message him. I know that Jean and I have had a number of conversations, and he is also the chair of the advisory group. And I honestly think that he is confusing that next meeting with this next meeting, possibly. Oh, cool. Thanks, Cole. Just let me know. Anybody is allowed to talk to me individually if that is helpful. The hardest thing is to get things up and rolling and going. And I think, honestly, I think it's going to be 10 times harder as our lives are also starting to get going. So I am willing to do a lot of the actual work of pulling this together because I think that my life is probably very similar to how it was 3 months ago as it will be 3 months from now. I just might be on airplanes. That might be the biggest difference in my life, which is utterly terrifying considering I'm terrified to go to the grocery store, but I don't have to worry about it just yet. So relax. I have a therapy appointment this week. Relax. So I am willing to do a lot of that kind of work while everybody is scrambling. But I admit that my area of limitation is that I'm not in industry. So I really need your brains to kind of get things started. That's the only downside, I think, to this little scenario. But if we can do something maybe possibly by like the next meeting, or maybe like a week or two before the next meeting, then I can actually produce some drafts of what this 12-page, because it's 12 months, I guess, document would end up looking like at CHOPS. And then y'all would have something instead of it just being a in the air conversation to be like, this is stupid. There is no way my vice president of chapter is ever going to like, not even going to understand. These directions don't make any sense. And again, you all have that experience with, frankly, people who have been in chapter leadership because they're warm bodies and said yes, and don't have these skills. That's who we need to be able to understand these worksheets, right? Because this is really the choir. Y'all get it and you have the skills and probably will be annoyed at how elementary the worksheets will be. But there's the other people that we're trying to like get on board. So I'm happy I can commit to doing that before our next meeting, which I'm assuming will probably be at the end of April. Thoughts, comments on that?
I appreciate you taking the lead on it, and recognizing that pretty much everyone else on the call has already acknowledged that their lives are starting to get increasingly complicated. So having you to be the point person on that, we can plug in the details as the industry insiders that we are, but sure, leaning into your strength and areas of expertise as much as possible seems like the best way to get this actually done.
Yeah. If you take spelling out of the equation, I can type like an Olympic skill. But I've made these kind of recruitment retention things 150 times, but never for this industry. So that is both the best thing and the worst thing. So then if I can produce something, and I really mean it, that y'all have to be like, have you met this dude? He is never going to read these things. Yes, he volunteered to be in charge of programming for the chapter, but it's just so he could get free drinks to come into the meeting. He's never going to do this. How do we make these worksheets amenable to that person, right? Like, that's where I will need help. The other side of it is the social justice super woke members who are going to be like, why the fuck are we only paying attention to this in February or in May or whatever? Like, what's going on? How is this skill building? This is tokenizing and terrible. Yes, it actually is not awesome. But when we are trying to build skills that's even more damaging, it's at least a starting place. So how do we position that so that like woke cape wearers and what the hell is this can actually work on recruitment and retention? Because ultimately retention is about those people both feeling welcomed and allowing space for other people to come. That's really what we're talking about with retention. Recruitment is actually the easy part, is you just find new people who didn't know about you. But how do you keep them? That's where we're really talking about skill building and culture. Shh, don't tell anyone. Secret combos. And I guess the last piece I would think is to add into this really impressive work around partnerships. As you get a chance, I really do encourage, especially the ones on the local, state, maybe regional levels, is don't worry that it's like super specific to your area, because other areas are likely to have something similar. So if it's super specific, then just kind of explain a little bit more about what that is. I'm at least involved in a number of conversations where when I went to this tab last week, I think, and there's been more stuff added to it, but when I went to this tab a couple of weeks ago in the middle of another conversation, I was like, there is about to be a really great resource available on this Google Sheet for multiple conversations that are happening both on the foundation and the guild side that I don't know is documented. So that's it's really exciting actually. So I think that's enough homework, I think, for the next month or so. If I'll send out a doodle poll and do all that stuff, and Cole, if you can get me Joe's number, I'll send a text message to everyone so I'm catching up with everybody who wasn't here. If we shoot for a meeting at the end of April, if by like mid-April, like 2 weeks or so, these things can be clarified. The most importantly are those questions and maybe the identity lenses, we'll call it lenses because some of it's occupational, although I guess that's kind of an identity too. If those can be kind of prioritized, and if we're sticking to 12, are we sticking to 9? What are y'all thinking number wise? But if you can give me those rubrics today before we get off the phone, and then dump in the next 2 weeks, I will build something for the May call.
I think given the trajectory of the year for most chapters, where the December is a lot of like year-end events, and there's a lot of, and the industry at large is sort of very busy in December, and then January we're spending a lot of time sort of, I think it's not a full turnover for local leadership anymore, because people are on sort of rotating 3-year terms instead of the original 2 years and then new people situation. But there will always be new leaders, or at least when there are new leaders, it will almost always be in January. So I'm thinking, for me, just instinctively, 10 months worth of ideas or identity groups to target seems like a good fit, just so we can, not be doing that specifically in December and not be doing that specifically in January, but then starting in February. February seems like a good one for Black History Month, and then going through at least maybe November. I don't know if we want to go all the way down that far, because also that's when the organization as a whole would be doing its sort of big membership push for the next year. So maybe 9, but 9 or 10, I think. And I don't want to be the only one making that decision though. So anyone else have a thought on it, I'd be happy to hear.
I think that's very valid, very honest to admit. We tend, like, we're all running on December, and then January we're like catching up slash new members oncoming, like you said. So I think that makes sense.
Great. I am happy to do all of the things, right? I know I'm very clear on where I need like bumper rails. Otherwise I will create something that has nothing to do with y'all's timeline. scope, etc. And so that's why like you need to like, I am a Mylar balloon of experience and you need to yank my ribbon down. There's a metaphor and a visual for
Well,
you.
Equally, like I am trying to learn and what I want to participate in this group and other groups that I'm in is to learn. So if you need help, I mean, obviously, just like you can email me. And what I'm learning is to be better at responding to those emails and to be active with those emails and to, you know, do the homework. So yeah, don't feel bad. You have carte blanche to remind. Yeah, there it is. I said it. Remind away.
I think
Well-
it's also like on a national level, we can be more proactive, just getting content out to everybody within this structure in a way that like doesn't necessarily happen now, even if it's as simple as like sharing a reading list and some social media accounts to follow. That there could be a bit of like publicity and higher up structure that goes out on a national platform that isn't happening now, that can kind of wrangle a little bit of this in without putting it all on local leadership.
Totally. One of the things that's really interesting, Alina, is that I hear, and Kim, you may have things to say about this as well, but I hear more and more and more so like specifically for, oh, because you're on the advisory group, I can talk about this. So as I have been trying to recruit members at large to be on the advisory group that are not in any leadership position at all, but like just regular members from different places who are interested in being regular members. So I am having some amazing conversations with people who like haven't paid their dues. They didn't know that there were chapter presidents. They hang out at some of the chapter events. They didn't do anything. Like the last woman I spoke to didn't know there were regional conferences, right? Like we are talking uninvolved members at large who are interested in getting involved. That is a very hard bucket of people to find because they don't respond to emails, because they don't know that there are emails or a website or regional conferences, etc. I'm having the time of my life. And when I tell them about all these things that are happening, the theme is, you know, as soon as I like filled out that form on the website, I got all this stuff that is happening on a national level, but I have no idea what's happening on a local level, which is interesting, right? Like, oh, okay, great. So then I would say like, okay, so then we need to be doing more on a national level because that's who people have access to. They don't, I mean, I live 6 hours away from a chapter of my professional organization I belong to. I don't care what happens on a chapter level. It doesn't impact me at all. Then when I have conversations with like the NCC or other chapter leaders or other people who are involved or the volunteers at the regional conference or the symposium or whatever, I talk to USB people every day. When I talk with them, they're like, how is the rubber hitting the road? Because everything, the chapters are doing everything and it never goes up to nationals. Like nobody knows what's happening on national. So then I'll be like, have you been to the website? Have you been to social media? And they're like, no, we don't do any of that stuff. So it just totally depends on which one you're involved in. It seems that the other one is not doing enough. So Alina, to your point, yes, they both need to be doing things. Sounds great, right? So like if there's a reading list, for example, or even a reading list that then has a book club that comes along with it, that could be a national initiative that is supported by the chapters and people who don't live anywhere near a chapter, right?
Yeah.
Like that all of these things are possible and it's everyone's job. Because associations typically, if you're involved on a chapter level, you tend to trust the chapter level, or at least your chapter. And there's other chapters that are terrible, but your chapter is the good one, like group pride. So then the satellite that is the beast, that is whatever nationals means, is the bad guy. And then when you flip it around, it's the other way. Like, I don't know what the hell's wrong with them. Like, it's super clear up here and we hand it to the chapters and they fuck it all up because they don't know what they're doing. Like, that is every association I work with. Welcome to groups of humans, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, that's a great idea. And could be another resource around recruitment and retention. Like, I'm making this up, but what if that reading list is also industry specific about different bits and pieces and things that people don't know about, you know, like And I'm in an MBA program, and my professor shared something recently about Jack Daniels and their sustainability program. And I was able to reference how the recipe for Jack Daniels was stolen from that Jack Daniels' slave and blah, 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 blah. And my professor was like, how do you know this? And I was like, haha, I learned something at the regional conferences, right? Like there's little facts like that that people don't know. They just don't know them. That can be not even like whole books, but documentaries or TED Talks or articles or little videos or something that are educational about a lot of different things related to the industry. So anyway, I'm TED Talking. Kim, you leaned forward. Were you going to say something? You're muted. No, I'm not. I'm just leaning forward. I'm being the thing
Just
where
leaning forward. Yeah.
I was being your words. I could have said something inappropriate. Okay, so if we sort of kind of have 10-ish months that will be on, so the focus areas need to get prioritized to the top 10. And I don't care how you do that, but how vote, put little chicken scratch marks next to them or something. So whatever the top 10 are going to be, also could be like, no, we're not going to pick 10. We're going to provide 20 and they get to pick the 10 because maybe it's different by space of where you're at, right? Like there's options. And then for the decisions, your homework assignment is to come up with the kind of template of questions to ask yourself, regardless of who the focus area is that month, these particular questions, so that, like, let's say there's a subcommittee that's in charge of the diversity programming, because you know how we give like one person all the diversity job. So if the subcommittee of one is in charge of filling out these sheets because somebody in chapter leadership actually read CHOPS. Notice how we have narrowed this down to possibilities already. So that one person who read CHOPS, who has somebody in charge of filling out these sheets of paper, what questions would they ask to find out any of these answers, regardless of the focus area for their town? Or for where they live, for their communities, the greater community, not just their neighborhoods. That is what I mean by the decisions or making decisions. And then I will do the rest and come up with a sample that you can all hate. Hi, we're getting talked to now. That's right, Ladybug. You just talk on your own time. You do not have to get bossed around.
It's important that he be a little bossable for me at this stage.
It's not my kid. Cool. I know this call was set up for 2 hours, but I feel like I am clear on what my homework is. If y'all are clear on what your homework is, I might be able to gift you back an hour of your life.
I think maybe having a more, because a lot of the social identities tab, the first tab on that spreadsheet, like we have now 18 or so identities, but a lot of, I don't think they're necessarily aligned with what we're looking for. Like there's one tab that has social identity, race, but if we're like, are we going to spend 1 month of trying to appeal to every non-white potential member? I don't think that's how that would work. So having, like we're going to need to blow up some of those, right? Like, so race, we're going to need subcategories in that one. We're going to need to, like, Black, Latin, AAPI identities. Those we're going to need different, like, we're not going to focus on all of those in the same month, but we could focus, like others, like we might not focus on, we could focus on everything in the LGBTQI tab. That could be 1 month, but I think just flagging that we're not, like, that some of these are probably not identities that we're really needing to focus on through a DEI lens. And some of them we're going to need to blow out and sort of like figure out which constituencies within that social identity we're going to need to focus on.
Yes, and what you could do with that. So this is another one of those things where people who get it are going to be like, I can't believe the DEI person said this. It's recorded. She's terrible. We should throw her in jail. So let's say that if racial diversity is where people tend to start when we think about DEI, because it's visible and invisible oppression is real, etc. Now there's other forms of visible oppression, and I can hear all of the women, specifically the white women in USBG, being like, wait a minute, I get it. So you can pick an identity that is super specific And that is every month. But then the questions inside of those identities hit on those other things, right? So if you picked, I'm trying to pick something that we haven't already talked about. Why is my brain blanking? That wasn't even a sentence. That's exactly what's happening. So if we're going to take non-native English speakers, let's say that's a lens. It's not on the list. I tried to make one up. So non-native English speakers, great. The question.
Language is on the list, just for the record.
Okay, well, I'm going to stick to it anyway because my brain can't work. So if we're going to pick language, then the questions could be, are there LGBT communities or venues in town for non-native English speakers? Like, where do women who are LGBT and don't speak English as a first language go? Like, now I'm getting like super specific, right? But if we did race, if we said like Black or African-American, and then we could say like, where do not straight Black or African-American people go? Where do Black or African-American women go? What about upper class? What about middle class? Like, you could ask all of those. Some of these identity questions are also going to be the questions inside of the group, because no matter what group you pick, we have intersectionality, right? So there's all different kinds of identities. Where do conservative folks go versus liberal folks go? Where do sports ball people of a particular identity go? Whatever those things are and however specific you want to get, the questions underneath can be as specific as you want them to be, right? So it is also possible that you flip this. So maybe the lens is a different type of occupation. And then the question are different identities inside of that occupation. I don't know. And that's what we get to figure out. Right? Thoughts, comments, peanuts, snacks, dog walks?
It's good to think about. It just opens up like a whole, you can go down rabbit holes for sure.
I love me some rabbit holes.
Yeah.
If you think about so maybe this is helpful for the focus areas. If you think about your community where you actually live, how is your community segregated? So like, I don't know where most of y'all live, right? But I've been to all your towns. So for the first thing I think of is suburban and urban. But inside suburban and urban, I also think about class. And then inside of suburban and urban and class, I also think about race. That's just how like the town is divided up. Okay, great. So then what questions would I ask inside of those 9 different elements right there, just on race, economic class, suburban, and urban? Just that. If I had to ask all 9 of those, actually, I think it's 6 because I can't do math in my head. But if I would ask all 6 of those categories the exact same questions, the point is that you are trying to uncover the hard yeses and the hard no's instead of just the easy no's and easy yeses. And as you change different lenses each month, then that will shift and change, but the questions don't necessarily have to shift and change. So I don't know what's all a focus and I don't know what's all a question, but between these 2 tabs, we got 9 goes at it. Or 10 goes, because we said 2 months with nothing.
Yeah, this tracks.
Ta-da! Okay, and then I will do magic work. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye! I've gifted you 57 minutes of your life back. Congratulations.
Hooray.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
You're more than
Jess.
welcome.
Thank you for everything.
I promised Cole and Colleen that we would have like productive meetings that are full of action and doing things. Promise.
Successful so far. Thank you.
Okay. Woo. Okay. I'm going to end this meeting and go to the bathroom. You're welcome.
All right.
Bye.
Jess.